were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
The topic of UFO sightings and the UFO religion is fascinating. The United States possesses a notably intriguing history in this respect. Throughout the years, there have been plentiful accounts of UFO sightings in the United States, and a few of these sightings have resulted in the establishment of a UFO religion.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had.
The U.S. boasts an extensive history of UFO sightings, with reports tracing back to the 1920s. Recently, an 8 to 10 foot alien was encountered in a Miami mall, but the authorities have once again not disclosed any details, raising many questions.
The American government is not being open.
Join us as we delve into some of the documented UFO sightings, including the most recent Miami alien encounter. Miami Mall alien encounter.
Aliens invading Miami are going viral on social media.
This is for real, folks. The conspiracy theory stems from a large police presence at Bayside Marketplace on New Year's Day.
Reports have surfaced regarding a purported extraterrestrial incident at Bayside Mall in Miami, Florida. This follows a significant police presence at the mall on January 1st at 9:35 p.m. In a video capturing the event, this marks the first instance of information emerging along with the visuals from the January 1st incident. Several days later, witnesses emerged, describing creatures ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall, reminiscent of a prior incident in Las Vegas. However, media accounts vary, suggesting it was either a teenage brawl, teens wielding sticks, or even teens setting off fireworks. Some reported a shooting, while others suggested gang-related activity. Discrepancies persist, with media outlets using edited tweets unrelated to the incident as sources. Despite this, anomalies matching the described creatures have been observed on camera. Witnesses, including those at the mall, reported encounters with what they believed were aliens. An individual described a chaotic scene with gunshots, people fleeing, and shadowy figures seemingly chasing them. Strikingly, witnesses spoke of a lack of video evidence from inside the mall, supporting claims that people refrained from filming due to fear for their lives. The situation becomes more perplexing with talks of non-disclosure agreements, deleted videos, and redacted statements. The scale of the response, involving numerous police cars, helicopter searchlights, and a no-fly zone over the mall, raises questions about the nature of the incident. While some dismiss it as a mere teenage altercation, the absence of comprehensive video evidence and the removal of witness accounts contribute to the mystery. 1973, Pascagoula abduction, Mississippi. Reports of alien abductions are not rare, and most of them have been debunked as either hoaxes or attributed to phenomena like sleep paralysis. However, a police officer's effort to disprove a sensational abduction account would ultimately prove compelling evidence supporting the truthfulness of the victims. On the night of October 11, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker Jr. finished work and decided to engage in some night fishing. While casting their lines shortly after sunset, they noticed blue lights flashing in the water. Upon looking up, they observed a blue light about 2 to 3 miles away, moving toward them. Descending rapidly, it reached the bayou and positioned itself in front of the men, coming to a halt 2 to 3 feet off the ground, approximately 25 yards away. The light emanated from a large, oblong-shaped craft that emitted an unusual whirring or whizzing sound during its movement before coming to a stop. Hickson started heading towards the river, but before making much progress, an opening materialized in the peculiar craft. 3 beings floated out of the craft towards him and Parker. These beings seemed to be clad in a skin-tight bluish suit and hovered slightly above the ground. Instead of hands, they had claw-like appendages, and their bullet-shaped heads with no necks appeared to sit directly atop their torsos. Hickson estimated their height to be just under 6 feet. The beings remained silent, with one occasionally emitting a buzzing noise while the other two stayed completely quiet. Parker, overwhelmed with fear, eventually lost consciousness, and both he and Hickson found themselves immobilized. Two of the entities floated behind Hickson, using their pincers to effortlessly lift him off the ground. Hickson later recounted in a police interview that the creatures didn't exert force. There was no sensation of pain. Instead, they seemed to guide him in the direction they desired. These beings transported Hickson into the craft, where Parker, now unconscious, disappeared from sight. Inside the vessel, Hickson floated and rotated as an indescribable machine appeared to inspect him. Struggling to articulate the experience, he likened the machine to a giant eye with an attached device, scanning his entire body. Once the perceived scan concluded, the entities left him floating, devoid of pain or discomfort. Hickson emphasized he felt nothing but internal terror. The room he was in lacked machinery or furniture, its walls emanating a bright white light. After an estimated 20 to 30 minutes, the beings returned, placing him on his chest. Despite attempting to communicate, Hickson received only a buzzing response from the previously buzzing creature. Hickson's next recollection involved standing outside of the ship with the frozen in terror Parker. The ship had vanished, and Hickson struggled to revive his companion. Initially opting for silence, they eventually contacted Keesler Air Force Base, which directed them to the sheriff. Instead, they first approached a local newspaper, finding no reporters. It was only when they decided to report their abduction to the sheriff. Hickson acknowledged that he anticipated skepticism, but still felt compelled to report the incident to the authorities. The sheriff conducted a brief interview, but remained unconvinced, suspecting the men were dishonest. In an attempt to expose their deception, he discreetly left a hidden tape recorder running in the interrogation room, stepping out momentarily, hoping to catch the two conspiring. However, the recording provided further evidence that, if anything, the two men genuinely believed they had experienced an abduction. The tape captured the men in a state of panic, with Parker expressing a need to return home or seek medical help to calm down. Hickson mentioned his desire for a drink to soothe his nerves. Parker, having passed out from terror, admitted his recollection was less detailed, but shared his experience of initial paralysis and the emergence of creatures from the ship's side door. Amidst the distress, Hickson warned of the disbelief they would face, stating, "They won't believe it. They gonna believe it one of these days. Maybe it's too late. I knew all along they was people from outer worlds up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me." Growing agitated, Hickson declared his need for a stiff drink to aid sleep and left the room. The last segment of the recording captured Parker, alone, expressing disbelief and turning to prayer with the words, "It's hard to believe. Oh God, it's awful. I know there's a God up there." No other witnesses were present during the Pascagoula abduction, and Hickson declined to undergo a polygraph test regarding the incident. Over time, Hickson's initial account underwent some changes in details. Whether due to embellishments or memory alterations remains uncertain. A skeptic suggested that Hickson might have imagined the entire encounter during a waking dream state, with Parker going along due to suggestibility resulting from his loss of consciousness. Hickson subsequently shared his story on 4 TV programs, and both men participated in various interviews. Years later, Parker established a TV production company to create shows related to UFOs and published a book late in his life recounting the abduction. While the two men provided fodder for skeptics to scrutinize their story, the behavior recorded when they were unaware of being observed remains unexplained. The original secret recording aimed to expose the hoax, but instead revealed two men visibly terrified and in a near state of panic. After 45 years, another witness emerged, Maria Blair, previously instructed by her family to remain silent for decades, decided to come forward and corroborate the men's story. On the same night, Blair, waiting in a parked car as her husband slept, observed a blue light rising from the opposite riverbank and ascending into the sky. Blair initially dismissed the incident until news of the abduction surfaced the next day, realizing she had witnessed the craft after it took the men. Despite her desire to speak out, her husband cautioned her for years to keep silent, fearing ridicule. While Blair's account could be seen as a post-event involvement, with her husband playing a supporting role, the truth of the night remains unknown. What is certain is that a secret tape recording provided strong evidence that, no matter what occurred, Hickson and Parker, at the very least, believed that they had been abducted by aliens. 2004, the USS Nimitz sightings. This UFO incident would remain undisclosed for an extended period until footage recorded by the involved pilots was divulged to the public. Contrary to expectations, the Navy promptly acknowledged that the footage was authentic, dispelling any notion of it being a hoax. The Nimitz incident would subsequently serve as the catalyst for reignited public interest in UFOs, prompting a significant shift in how the subject was handled at the highest echelons of power in America. The sequence of events unfolded on November 14, 2004, approximately 100 miles southwest of San Diego, California. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was engaged in a series of drills ahead of an upcoming deployment to the Persian Gulf. At 2 p.m., the two F-18 Super Hornets, conducting routine training, received an impromptu tasking from the USS Princeton. Unbeknownst to the pilots, the Princeton had undergone a radar upgrade and had been tracking enigmatic objects exhibiting erratic maneuvers for several days. These objects swiftly descended from 80,000 feet to sea level in about a second, showcasing remarkable speed and maneuverability. According to Kevin Day, Princeton's senior radar operator during the incident, they had monitored over 100 unidentified objects in the past 7 days. He noted that at times, the radar display resembled watching snowfall from the sky due to the sheer number of objects. Now, these entities had reappeared, and with a training flight airborne, there existed an opportunity to finally observe and determine the authenticity of these objects or ascertain whether Princeton's highly expensive new radar was indeed malfunctioning. An operations officer at the Princeton directed the Super Hornets to navigate towards the position of one of the objects, inquiring eerily if the pilots were carrying any live ordnance. They were not. Upon reaching the most recent tracked location of the objects, flight leader and squadron commander, Commander David Fravor, commented on the absence of any visible signs until he noticed an unusual disturbance in the ocean below him. Something was causing the water to swirl, with waves crashing over what seemed to be a substantial object just beneath the surface. Later, a theory emerged that the Super Hornets might have actually detected a nuclear attack submarine commonly accompanying a U.S. carrier strike group. However, what seized their attention next was an object hovering motionless not far away, approximately 50 feet above the water. Fravor approximated the object to be around 40 feet in length, resembling a tic-tac, and appearing with no wings, engine, or visible means of propulsion. The object would remain stationary and then execute unpredictable and sudden maneuvers over the ocean, reminiscent of throwing a ping-pong ball against the wall. Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich, Fravor's wingwoman, maintained her position above as Fravor descended in his aircraft for a closer observation. She later expressed a sense of fear, watching the craft execute unpredictable and remarkably high G maneuvers, pondering how she could engage if it posed a threat. As Fravor descended, the tic-tac appeared to acknowledge his presence and initiated a counterclockwise swoop, mirroring his movements in reverse. Abruptly, Fravor directed his aircraft towards the object in an assertive maneuver, prompting the object to react as if accepting the challenge. It swiftly accelerated towards Fravor, flying directly across his aircraft. Once the object vanished, the operations officer on the Princeton instructed them to proceed to a predetermined rendezvous point 60 miles away. During their journey, the Princeton unexpectedly radioed in, detecting the Tic Tac object again on its radar. To everyone's amazement, the object awaited the Super Hornets precisely at the rendezvous point, reaching it in less than a minute. It almost seemed like a deliberate provocation. As Fravor and Dietrich were forced to return to the Nimitz, another pair of Super Hornets managed to catch up to the UFO, capturing the now famous Tic Tac video. Doubters might argue that the complete USS Nimitz carrier strike group had merely misidentified a distant passenger jet. If proven true, it would imply that the US Navy has reached levels of utter incompetence comparable to Russia. Others, such as science educator and celebrity Neil deGrasse Tyson, would ridicule the incident, noting how UFOs consistently appear blurry. This overlooks the fact that the entire footage, including heads-up display markings, is intentionally blurry due to the resolution reduction, a common practice by the military with footage from sensitive sensor platforms before public release. The Nimitz incident brings attention to a peculiar aspect of skepticism. We entrust our combat aviators with defending $1.2 billion aircraft carriers, yet skepticism arises when they report anomalous crafts, even when the U.S. Navy supports their claim. 1952, Operation Mainbrace. UFO concerns emerged in the post-war era period in America and eventually reached the United Kingdom in 1950. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill sought a briefing on flying saucers from his Air Minister. He was reassured that there was no cause for alarm, and credible evidence suggested these apparent alien crafts were likely misidentifications, hoaxes, or natural phenomena. 2 years later, the British Ministry of Defense had to retract that statement. In 1952, NATO initiated Exercise Mainbrace, simulating a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. This event led to Captain Edward Ruppelt, head of the USAF's Project Blue Book, to note that it finally prompted the RAF to officially acknowledge the UFO phenomenon. Indeed, the intensive investigation following the Mainbrace incidents spurred the CIA's Assistant Director of Scientific Intelligence, Dr. H. Marshall Chadwell, to draft a classified memo titled British Activity in the Field of UFOs. During the fall of 1952, a massive 12-day military exercise involving 80,000 NATO personnel took place in waters off the coast of Norway and Denmark. The US and UK navies dominated the international coalition's power, displaying both strength to deter the Soviet Union and practicing a response to a potential Soviet invasion of Western Europe. It marked the largest naval demonstration in the region since World War I, with all personnel vigilant for Soviet surveillance aircraft and ships. However, an unexpected presence decided to observe the exercise. The sequence of events commenced on September 13th, when the crew aboard the Danish destroyer Williamos observed a triangular-shaped object swiftly traversing the sky. Illuminated by an unusual bluish light, the object, estimated to be moving at supersonic speeds, was witnessed by the destroyer's captain. A week later, during the ongoing exercise, the unidentified flying object made a reappearance. On September 19th, a British Meteor fighter jet, returning to its Topcliffe airfield in Yorkshire just before 11 a.m., played a central role in what British intelligence later termed the Yorkshire Incident. Senior British military leaders assembled on the ground witnessed a silvery disc-like metallic object closely tailing the meteor. The object exhibited swaying movements akin to a pendulum as the meteor attempted to land. Responding to the unusual occurrence, the meteor aborted its landing and initiated a circling maneuver in an attempt to observe the object more closely. On the ground, British officers observed the disc-like object coming to a complete standstill, hovering silently and rotating slowly on its axis. As the meteor approached, the disk swiftly shot off to the west at remarkable speed, executing an abrupt course change before vanishing in the southeastern horizon. Dr. Chadwell documented the incident in a CIA memo, noting the observation by numerous high-ranking officials from the Royal Air Force and civilian onlookers. This led to newspaper coverage of the incident, much to the displeasure of the RAF. On September 20th, the crew aboard the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt aircraft carrier identified a silvery spherical object that appeared to be tailing the fleet. Reporter Wallace Litwin captured photographs of the object, which were promptly confiscated by Navy intelligence. Although the images were never publicly disclosed, Captain Rappelt, Project Blue Book's chief, later affirmed their excellent quality, revealing the object's swift movement as it approached the fleet. Doubts about the object being a stray weather balloon were dispelled during the post-incident investigation, as no ship had launched one that day. Later that evening, at Karup Field in Denmark, Danish Air Force officers observed a shiny metallic disc flying overhead around 7:30 p.m. The object seemed to be originating from the direction of the fleet at sea and swiftly vanished into the eastward clouds. On September 21st, Royal Air Force pilots, while returning to base, witnessed a shiny sphere approaching from the direction of the Sea Fleet. The 6 aircraft immediately pursued the sphere, but it skillfully evaded them and disappeared. Upon the aircraft's return to base, one pilot looked back and noticed a sphere closely trailing him. Attempting to chase it again, the pilot found that the sphere turned and rapidly accelerated out of sight. The main brace sightings remained unexplained and couldn't be attributed to visual anomalies or weather events. Their credibility was affirmed by personnel across the NATO alliance, prompting the British intelligence services to reopen an investigation into the UFO phenomenon due to the profound impact of the incident. However, a month later, another incident closer to home would unsettle the UK military. On October 21, 1952, Flight Lieutenant Michael Swinney, a pilot instructor, took his new student, Royal Navy Lieutenant David Crofts, for a training flight. The jet's takeoff was uneventful as it ascended into a thick cloud bank. Upon piercing through the clouds at 15,000 feet, the two men were startled to encounter 3 nearly white, circular objects directly ahead. 2 were aligned horizontally, and the third was slightly tilted. Swinney instinctively took control of the jet, fearing they were on a collision course with 3 men parachuting down. Upon leveling out, the aviators observed the hovering objects more closely. In an interview, Swinney described the objects as resembling typical saucers, but noted their unusually flat appearance as they climbed above them. Despite their stillness, when the Meteor aircraft passed above, the objects swiftly shifted from one side of the plane to the other in a sudden, rapid movement. Maintaining an altitude of 35,000 feet, Swinney and Crofts observed the craft below, noting a faintly fuzzy or iridescent light along its edges. The craft seems solid, lacking windows, portholes, or visible signs of propulsion. The sighting disturbed Swinney to the extent that he ensured his oxygen flow was proper, even requesting Crofts to confirm the functioning of the oxygen system, a detail corroborated by Crofts when recounting the story years later. Suggesting pursuit as the UFOs started to move away, Crofts proposed chasing them. However, Swinney dismissed the idea, recalling an incident from the U.S. West Coast where pilots chasing a UFO vanished, rumored to be vaporized by the pursued object. Swinney intended to abort the exercise and return to base, but reported the sighting via radio before doing so. The radio call stirred chaos on the ground as personnel, previously dismissive of UFO rumors, were unnerved by their instructor's report. Air traffic control instructed Swinney to approach the UFOs for a closer look, prompting him to reluctantly steer the Meteor towards the craft, accelerating to Mach 0.8. As the Meteor closed in, the objects seemingly vanished. Swinney and Crofts noted as they approached, they would glance at the aircraft for orientation, and then look away to clear their vision. Upon returning their gaze, the objects had disappeared. Despite this, Swinney and Crofts had observed the objects for a total of 10 minutes. What the two pilots were unaware of, however, is that miles away, the UFOs were inducing even more panic with the RAF. Without the pilots' knowledge, the UFOs had been tracked on a radar in Little Risington, prompting a call to HQ Fighter Command at Stanmore to report the track. Amidst concerns of a potential surprise Soviet attack, military officers promptly initiated an air defense alert. A ground-controlled interception radar at RAF Sopley commenced tracking unidentified aircraft swiftly traversing southwest England. Sopley's commanding officer commenced with the CO and RAF southern sector, leading to the issuance of orders to scramble interceptors. A pair of meteors on quick reaction alert took to the sky within minutes, guided towards the unidentified craft by Sopley. Meanwhile, senior officers at RAF Southern Sector observed on a pilot as the incoming meteors closed in on the unidentified craft, which abruptly accelerated to an estimated 1,000 miles per hour. Despite the meteors throttling up to their maximum capacity, they trailed the craft but were unable to match its speed. So, what are your thoughts on these UFO encounters? Tell us in the comments below, and give this video a thumbs up.